Hello and welcome to Mojo. I'm Chrissy Bashford. I'm so happy that you have clicked on to find out more about my coaching, retreats and workshops. Firstly, I'd like to tell you a little bit about me and why I'm so passionate about healing and empowering fellow humans. I guess you could say that my best qualification that I have to offer you is life experience. Life has taught me a lot, and I always say to my clients that there is nothing that they could not tell me that I have not heard before, experienced before, seen before, or done myself. I grew up in what most people would describe a volatile, abusive, dysfunctional household. It wasn't all bad, but it certainly wasn't rosy. Before my mother and father divorced, we had all the stuff. I mean, material stuff. But there was always a great deal of tension and lack of affection. I can look back on my childhood and see that I developed chronic anxiety from a very young age. From as young as 7, I can remember suffering migraines regularly, and that continued for many years. Anxiety is fear in disguise. Anxiety is fear of the future. And anxiety was modeled to me quite well by my mother. And I can look back and see how, as a child, I set up many debilitating, limiting beliefs about myself. Beliefs like I'm not good enough, I should be different, I should look different, I don't belong in this family, I don't belong in this world, I'm fat, I'm stupid, all sorts of things. My way of coping with all this stuff going on in my mind and in the house was with food. And although I was a very active kid, I was quite heavy. I was constantly teased about my weight and I had poor self-image. And you might say I had pretty poor role models around me to show me how to love and care for myself. In fact, there was quite a few members of my family that were very emotionally and physically unwell. Overweighting and obesity was all around me, and so was toxic, dysfunctional examples of relationships. Consequently, I struggled with my weight and eating disorders for many years. I punished myself with vigorous exercise and sometimes starvation, all in the pursuit of happiness. But that wasn't the answer. From a very young age, I wondered about God or the universe. Why are we here and what are we meant to be doing here? I was brought up with no religious or spiritual teachings at all, besides my father throwing tomatoes at the door knockers, the Bible bashers as they were called. I did, however, have a beautiful grandmother who lived by astrology, and she seemed to have some spiritual awareness, and I adored being with her. When I would ask my parents or older siblings what they believed, I was brushed off like I was some kind of freak. In fact, any kind of deep and meaningful conversations were taboo, and honesty and openness was not high in the hierarchy of values for most of my family, except maybe my grandmother. It was more humour that we had, even if it was sarcasm and abuse in disguise. I'm not saying they were bad people at all, and I love them. They were my family, and they taught me a lot about life, and they've made me who I am today. Even though some of the lessons were tough, I wouldn't be who I am today without all of my life experiences. I was taught many positive things like a good work ethic and to do everything to the best of my ability, which led me to having a highly successful hairdressing career. I represented my country in hairdressing competitions and did very well. And I opened up my first salon when I was 21, so I've been self-employed ever since then, and I've ran many successful businesses. Getting back to my childhood, when I was around 12 years old, after many years of volatility, my parents eventually separated, which was sad in some respects, but it brought some kind of peace. My sisters were both a fair bit older than me and had cars and jobs, and both of them moved out with their boyfriends. And I did the unthinkable in those days. I stayed living with my father. As much as he was very, very strict, he seemed to be more emotionally stable than my mother. And after years of being abused most days by my mother, I felt safer with my dad. Things were peaceful with just Dad and I in the house together, although with Dad working strange hours, I became prey to predators and I was sexually abused by a few different males at different times. Those early teens are such a fragile time for a young woman getting to know herself and her body, and to have it violated is very damaging. Sexual abuse makes you shut down, you dim your light and live in fear of it happening again. I never told anyone in fear of my father finding out. I truly believed that if he found out, he would kill them and end up in jail. And then who would look after me, because I was not going back to my mother. So I said nothing to anybody. Yes, it was definitely very peaceful living with Dad and I left school before I was 15 to do a hairdressing apprenticeship. So I grew up quite quickly. Then came the stepmother from hell. All the games and manipulation got too much for me, so I moved out of home at a very young age. And not long after that, I met my ex-husband. And it was in this union that I relived that cycle of abuse once again. There was great love there between us. However, we were just two immature, damaged people trying to make a good life together. We created two beautiful children and great material wealth, but I was miserable, exhausted, and constantly overwhelmed. I felt disrespected, unappreciated, and unheard for most of my marriage, in fact, for most of my life. You see, I wanted different. I wanted a different relationship, different to what I had watched as a kid, but I didn't know how to do it differently. So I attracted a partner that gave me more of the very thing that I didn't want. I didn't have a lot of conscious awareness back in those days. And in some weird way, I felt secure with this man, even though he treated me inappropriately at times. And I did not feel worthy of the love and respect that I wanted so much. But I stayed with him for a long time because I didn't ever want to get a divorce. Eventually, that marriage ended in dragging those two beautiful, innocent children through a torrid divorce. I had to get out because I didn't want to keep modeling a toxic, abusive relationship to my kids any longer. That divorce was one of the worst I've ever heard of, and it was very damaging for our kids and for everyone concerned. For a long period of time, I was stalked by my ex-husband's new woman, and I was constantly undermined and harassed by the pair of them. Their narcissistic behaviour got too much for me, and this resulted in me having a restraining order on her after she was caught under my house in her pyjamas at 11:30 at night one night. And after all that, I ended up with post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, I'm not blaming my ex-husband for all of it because, as you know, it takes two to tango, and sometimes I gave as good as I got. My ex-husband and I came from very different upbringings, although we were both very damaged and insecure. And I'm not here to blame my parents or blame his parents. Like I always say to my clients, there is not a parent in their right mind that deliberately sets out to screw up their own kids, but many, many of them do. And we all do the best we can with the awareness and the circumstances that we have at the time. So our parents did the best job that they could, and they had parents that did the best job that they could. And unfortunately, patterns of behaviour like verbal, emotional, and physical abuse are passed down through generations. After my divorce, I found myself in one weird or toxic relationship after another. And sometimes I would think this is my fault because I'm so messed up. For the most part of my life, I would have to admit that I was not in control of my emotions and didn't really know myself, much less love and accept myself. And as much as I was an ambitious and somewhat successful woman, I felt deeply unhappy and troubled. And I attracted unfortunate, even tragic circumstances into my life. weird shit that most people would only watch in a bad movie, some of which I almost didn't make it through. What I mean by that is sometimes I wanted to end my internal suffering and I thought about killing myself on a regular basis. Even though I would present to the world this happy, well-kept facade, underneath I was struggling for so long. I had the classic poor me going on, the victim mentality. And I would often think, why is this happening to me? I'm a good person, why? As much as I hated that weak, pathetic and angry side to me, I sat with her a lot and let her control a lot of my life. I talked a lot about my life to anyone that would listen to my sad story, and my anxiety was through the roof most of the time. My story became like my identity. Deep down, you would think that poor me should be getting attention. However, it actually drove some key people away, and every area of my life was suffering. I was a hot mess for a very long time. I longed to understand human behavior and why we do what we do. And I wanted to understand myself and why I treated myself so badly at times. I longed for inner peace and contentment, not just for me, but for all mankind. I was always searching for answers and searching for ways to heal myself, searching to feel whole. I had felt misunderstood and unsupported for most of my life, so I sought teachers, guides, mentors, healers that could support me, guide me, and steer me in the direction of truth, fulfillment, and enlightenment. I have invested thousands of dollars in my own personal development, and I will continue to do so. I guess you could say I became a serial learner of human behavior. Humans have always intrigued me. For a lot of the years while I studied, I kept doing hair, and even though I loved doing hair, it was the conversations that I loved the best. I've always found humans and their stories fascinating, and I would psychoanalyze every client when I worked on their hair, and I was consistently reminded that there is so much mental illness and disease and pain and suffering out there. I just knew I had to do more with my life than just hair. And so I eventually became a full-time life coach, and I haven't looked back. Along my healing journey, I tried everything. I tried the usual talking therapies like psychologists and counselors with very minimal results. I would sit there sobbing and telling them about my problems, and most of the time I could tell that they had no idea what I was going through and had no way to help me but to be a sounding board. I would pay them and think, all I did was sit there and talk about my problems, and I still feel like shit. I tried all sorts of energy healing as well, which was really nice and relaxing at the time, but then I would get back to my life and still feel like shit. The only therapies that worked for me were the ones that directly communicated with my unconscious mind. I'm talking about hypnotherapy and NLP. So you could say that I have been a retreat, workshop, course junkie for a long time, and I've tried most everything. Because I know that investing in yourself is the best investment you can ever make. And I know that if we are not constantly growing and transforming, we are stagnating, decaying, and eventually dying a slow, painful death on a soul level. And I know that the greatest gift that you can give to your children is the gift of your own healing. I didn't want my children to look at me with pity as I did with my mother. Our lives are either an example or a warning for our kids. I wanted to be an example of a woman who turned her pain into power, not someone who stayed bitter and twisted and sick. Throughout all of my years of study and my healing journey, I have come across the most powerful, life-changing tools and techniques. I have studied for many, many years, and I have learnt these techniques from the best teachers that I could find. And I have mastered these skills so I can heal others. Techniques that totally transformed my life in every area. Techniques that saved myself from myself. Techniques that have given meaning and purpose to my life. And along my journey, I have made some very deep, supportive relationships with like-minded souls. And I've met women who have become like my sisters. They've filled spaces of loneliness my own family could not. I vowed that one day I will run my own retreats and workshops to support women, and I will give them the best of what I have learnt to guide them, to heal them, and to transform their lives. And so it is. I take a holistic approach to my coaching, blending proven scientific cutting-edge techniques with ancient spiritual practices to positively transform mind, body, and soul. I coach both men and women one-on-one in my private practice in Newcastle, which I absolutely love, and I host women's retreats in Australia and overseas, especially designed to empower women and help them move forward and create the life that they so badly desire. There is something supernatural about getting a tribe of women together to support each other through transformation. It's truly very powerful. The deep connections women make with each other during my retreats is heartwarming to me, because I know that many of us can feel empty and excluded and judged even by our own family of origin. I created Find Your Mojo retreats for the modern woman to step out of their crazy world for a few days and take a magical journey of self-discovery and transformation. A few days to harness your feminine power and find the real you and respect, love, and accept yourself like never before. The word retreat means withdraw, draw back, pull back. An arrow can only be shot by pulling it backwards. And when it's launched, it flies full flight straight to the target. And that's exactly what you'll do when working with me. Whether it be one-on-one coaching or in a group, you'll always experience a breakthrough and the outcome will astound you. You'll be ignited to live out your true purpose in life, and you will feel confident, energized, and ready to make monumental changes in your relationships, in your health, and in fact, in every area of your life. At my retreats, my tribe members get a book that doubles as a detailed resource booklet, so you'll be able to refer back to it for years to come. And because I know that our lives can get a little too serious, I always make sure we have lots of fun and move and celebrate our beautiful female bodies. I use the best tools and techniques on the planet to create change and transformation. Thousands of women all over the world have used these techniques to change their lives forever, and I'd love you to have the advantage of seeing the power of what this can do for you as well. So if you are looking for inner peace, happiness, more energy, more confidence, better health, better relationships, to attract more love and abundance, and if you want to find your mojo, I urge you to join in on one of my retreats or come in for some one-on-one coaching. Either way, it will be my absolute honor to serve you. Thank you for watching. Big love to you, and bye for now.